Welcome to Alabama Justice Lawyering Up. My name is Richard Jaffe, the senior partner in the Birmingham, Alabama law firm of Jaffe, Hanle, Whisonant, and Knight. We are going to explore with you the hottest cases, the most controversial topics of Alabama justice, and we're going to bring to you exciting key players that make our Alabama justice work or not work. We look forward to having you. Welcome to another segment of Alabama Justice, Lawyering Up. And with me is my special guest, Rick Digiorgio, and we're going to talk about spirituality in the law. Rick, welcome.
Thank you, Richard. Happy to be here.
Glad you are here. And let's start off with a little bit about who is Rick Digiorgio.
All right. Well, I'll talk about my past a little bit. I am the eldest of 8 children, born in Tuscaloosa, moved to Birmingham when I was a child, and actually ended up going to 3 different grade schools by the time I finished 8th grade. We moved to Florida for a while, moved to Kentucky, went to high school in Kentucky, went to college in Kentucky, and then my family moved back to Birmingham. So I'm basically a Birmingham native. And my family, big family here. My dad was the youngest of 10 kids. So
And an engineer.
And he was the one that suggested that I become a lawyer.
Well, it
worked out fine.
Yeah, you just anticipated my next question. When was it that he made that suggestion?
When I was a senior in high school is when he suggested that I consider being a lawyer. I was going to, looking at a small liberal arts school called Center College in Kentucky, and a friend of his who was a lawyer and a banker was influential in our area in Bowling Green, Kentucky with Center College, and he thought that would be a good fit for me, and it turned out to be good.
There's no question about that.
Yeah, I got to keep playing football for a little while there at the 3D school and learn something at the same time.
And you were a quarterback, and actually you played a number of sports.
Played quarterback in high school. Wasn't able to throw the ball very well. We were back then it was called the wishbone. We were a running team, so I ended up being a running back in college there for a little while. But yeah, sports was important in our family. We had a lot of athletes in our group.
Now, there's certainly some similarities between sports and litigation.
Yes, competition.
Competitive.
Competition and teamwork. I mean, we actually, have teamwork in our law practice as well as we do in sports. So, and also, being able to play within the rules. In every sport, there's a set of rules usually to play by, and a lot of preparation time in sports, and it certainly is in practice of law.
Now, we're former partners, and
Correct.
I know you quite well, and you know me quite well.
Yes.
One of the things that I've admired about you the most is your spiritual approach to living. Tell me and the viewers a little bit about how you bring that to the practice of law.
That's a good question. It kind of evolved over time. I got married to my wife, T, when I was in law school, and I've always been somewhat of a religious person in practice. Was born and raised Catholic, still Catholic, and probably when I was about 30 years old, one of my cousins, who was about 10 years older than I was, got killed. And it kind of hit a chord with me at age 30 that made me start realizing how serious life was and how short it can be. And around that time is when I started getting a little more serious about my approach to God. And somewhere along the way, I then ended up going to a seminar. It was about stress in the law and how us lawyers have a high degree of stress and a high degree of suicides and alcoholism. And so the emphasis of that whole seminar was how to keep the practice of law out of your house when you go home, to leave it at the office. And after that seminar, I started thinking, really what would be better, instead of having this defensive wall that I'm going to establish from my office to my house, why don't I take the person who I would like to be in my house and to my family and take that person to the office and be more proactive in the approach at the office, which would be, I felt like, we shouldn't separate our work from our spirituality or our how we view ourselves in relationship to God, and how we would want to act in response to God should also follow us into the office. So that's what I started trying to do.
A little more of a deeper question, I think, would be, how do you take it to the next step and bring it to the competitive adversarial nature of litigation as a trial lawyer, which of course you are such a successful one?
I think starting from the inside, in order to give you the foundation to go out with it. You may remember, you actually introduced me to the writings of Thomas Merton, who was a Trappist monk, and his writings about contemplative prayer and contemplative attitude in meeting God in silence and meeting God without all the trappings was very influential to me, and I think it helped give me a foundation from which you can then go outward. Because if you go into the adversarial world without preparation, either for the battle, whether it be the actual thing you're trying to accomplish, but also the emotions that are going to come up during the battle, that's the hardest part for me, is since we are by nature a little bit more competitive, and I think growing up as being the oldest one, I'm also the person, as you may remember, who likes to be in charge. Both of us like to be in charge, and so that was we worked that out though. So when you get into the legal world, you start off adversarial. In the business world, you hope to actually create friends in order to create some business together with somebody, customers or whoever it might be. But in our world, you start off in what you do every day in a combative situation. So there's lots of opportunity for losing our temper, for being very self-absorbed, and that means you have to kind of be ready for that before it comes up, and hopefully be able to project. I know this is not per se a religious show, but literally project how Christians would view Christ, how we would view Christ, how Christ would be in this setting. And he was in some very adversarial settings. Sometimes he raised his voice, but usually he did things in a way that people would walk away knowing that he did love them, even if he might have disagreed with them.
So, taking it into the courtroom, you've got a witness on the stand, and you've done all kinds of litigation, but you mainly do personal injury.
Yes.
And that's when you represent someone who's been injured.
Yes.
So let's do this. Let's go to a break, and we come back in a moment. Let's talk about the challenges and what I consider to be some potentially inherent tension between representing your client and being a spiritual human being. We'll be right back. I'm Richard Jaffe, senior partner in the law firm of Jaffe, Hanle, Whisonant, and Knight. And with me is Mike Hanle, who has handled many, many, many federal cases, among other cases. Mike, what would you do if you received a call, like you do often, from someone who believes they're a subject or a target of a federal criminal investigation?
Well, the most important thing to do is to immediately reach out to the U.S. Attorney's Office to find out who is the principal U.S. Attorney that's handling that case, and you can begin to have a dialogue with that person.
And why is it important to do that?
Well, it allows us to participate in the shaping of the case, how that case will ultimately maybe be charged or not charged at all.
And what are federal sentencing guidelines?
Well, the federal sentencing guidelines are a complex series of calculations that begin with an offense level for each criminal charge, and it includes the calculation of your criminal history, which is your prior criminal conduct.
We at Jaffe, Hanle, Whisonant, and Knight are ready, willing, and able to talk with you or anyone in your family at any time if you find yourself in a position where you need someone experienced in the federal courts. Welcome back. So, Rick, we were talking a little bit about some of the tensions that occur with litigation, particularly when you're representing an injured client who, because things can't be resolved, ends up being a lawsuit. Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, I think first of all, the law, in principle, searches for the truth. So if you can help bring out the truth in how we approach witnesses or how we approach a case as to what documents I need, what witnesses I need, what I'm going to ask people about to find the truth. So if we focus on searching out the truth, then usually the case takes care of itself. So when I'm preparing witnesses, especially if I'm preparing my own witness, I'm looking for the truth. Now, granted, there are different ways of telling the truth, and some people can do a better job at telling the truth than others. So yes, we do help people understand what they need to convey in their testimony in the particular case, but it's still the truth. So we're still looking for what happened or whatever the situation may be. It's a little tougher when it's an adversarial situation where you are questioning the other side of your case. You're still looking for the truth. Matter of fact, you're probably looking for it harder at that point in time because most of us do not trust the other side. It's just kind of natural. So if you point your questions toward trying to find the truth, without necessarily losing, and I am not the best at this at times. I tell people all the time, my biggest opportunity for problems is in depositions, because in depositions there is no jury, there's very few people. So it's easier to lose your temper in that situation because not as many people are looking at you when it happens. So I have been known to get loud at depositions when I feel like the person is not telling us the truth. And so that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for the truth. And I think if I focus on that, then it'll come out. And I try not to attack somebody just for the sake of attacking them. Usually I actually trying not to ever do that, period. Not even if they don't tell the truth, because sometimes when people don't tell the truth, it comes out anyway. You know, you've experienced that, I'm sure. So the focus for me is find the truth, and the case should take care of itself.
So what about when you've got a witness that might be telling the truth, but at the same time you have a client that's depending on you, and you know from the client's perspective, you have to consider discrediting that witness even if they're probably or likely being truthful?
Well, again, if you have two people who witness a particular event, you're usually going to get two stories. And sometimes, without a fly on the wall with a camera, we may not ever really totally know the truth. thank God we have courts and jury systems to help us to move forward with a decision. In the civil world, a jury can make a decision based on the preponderance of the evidence, which is about saying, well, it's a little more likely than not that this side is true and this side is not. Doesn't mean that there's no truth found on the other side, just that this side is a little more likely. In the criminal work, it's beyond a reasonable doubt, which is a little stronger, that you have to carry your burden of proof. So in our world, we may not ever know the perfect truth. So the good news for us lawyers is we can create the case, present it to the jury, and let them decide. So I may not always know the truth exactly, how it happened. But I do know that the preponderance of the evidence would point in a direction that hopefully is toward my client. Hopefully, if I see a situation where the preponderance of the evidence is not toward my client, that I didn't take that case to begin with. And, I avoided that case to start with.
And I'm sure it becomes a little more complex when in the middle of a case, or maybe in the middle of a trial, you might begin to see the other side's viewpoint.
Absolutely. That, I think, is where trying to become a peacemaker may come into effect.
And it also might be that we as adversaries have to trust that the other side is doing their job and the jury will sort it out.
Absolutely. And in the end, of course, most cases do not go to trial today anyway. So most of the time the lawyers and the parties do work it out. And that's part of our job too. And I think at that point in time, we also have this opportunity to be peacemakers. That otherwise you don't have that in the courtroom as much. But before the courtroom, in our approach, in our tone of voice, in the cooperation that we can give on both sides that helps move a case along, could help to mend some fences a little bit between the parties. Even a lot of times in our cases, the people don't know each other. It's not like a business case where you might have somebody who knows the person who wronged them in a contract and they actually have a relationship. Most time in personal injury cases, there is no pre-existing